Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. Last week I received a new mould very kindly sent to me from Let's Resin, and it is a large dragon mould. I could not wait to have a go with this one. So whether you're here for inspiration or useful tips and tricks to have a go yourself, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Right, let's open the box and have a look at this dragon mould. As always, my mould came well packaged. It came with the mould housing and some very detailed instructions. The mould is very detailed and it's also top heavy when it's being filled, so it needs to have the mould housing. So yeah, Let's Resin, as always, have thought of everything. In the instructions, it goes into a lot of detail on how to put the mould housing together, because it is probably the most complex mould housing that I've ever seen in a Let's Resin mould. But yeah, it's fine with the instructions, and also it shows you exactly the places on the mould where you really need to squeeze it a lot to avoid getting air pockets in the finished piece. So yeah, I really like the instructions. Okay, let's prepare it all and put it all together, and then we will be ready to get started. The mould housing is open fronted, so there's only 3 sides to put together, and then you can slot the top on and slot the mould into the top. Nice and simple. To fill my mould, I will be using Let's Resin's Deep Pour Epoxy Resin. I think that the maximum depth for pouring the deep pour resin is 10 centimetres, but I'm not sure. I think it is about 10 centimetres, but the mould is much taller than 10 centimetres, so I decided to do it in 2 pours. For the first pour, I'm going to fill it up to where the crystal ball starts and the dragon finishes. Before filming, I filled the mould up with water up to the point where I would be filling my first layer to find out what the volume was. And the volume was 150 millilitres. Let's Resin's Deep Pour Resin is a 2-to-1 mixing ratio by volume, so I'm pouring 100 millilitres of part A and 50 millilitres of part B. Now, it does tell you in the instructions exactly how much resin you need to fill the mould, but in this instance that's not really much use to me because I'm doing it in 2 pours, so that was why I had to half fill it with water just to be sure of how much I would need. And even though we're in the height of summer here, I did put the resin into my resin pre-warmer just because it had been stored for so long. It's been a while since I've used deep pour resin, and in the cupboard it can just be quite cool. So I decided to warm it up a little bit because it really does help the resin to be as clear as possible. After that, I gave it a really good mix until it was completely clear and combined. And then just to make sure it was as clear as I could get it, I did put it into my Let's Resin bubble remover. All these fancy tools are completely optional. You don't need them for resin art, but they do help a lot. As I've already mentioned, there are a lot of places in this mould where pockets of air can very easily get trapped. And here I'm just pointing to all the different areas that you really need to squeeze to get them as smooth as possible. Mine definitely didn't come out perfect. I think the only way to get it absolutely perfect with no air trapped at all would be to put it into a pressure pot, if I'm completely honest. I just think there's no, with all the squeezing in the world, you can't get away with it. There's going to be some tiny pockets of air trapped in there. I've got to keep it real. So I added my resin just a small amount at a time so I could give it a really good squeeze. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm using the tail area of the mould as kind of a resin slide to pour the resin down. I was trying to avoid getting droplets of resin on the area of the mould that I'm not going to fill yet, because it does leave a mark on your finished piece. It's hard to explain, but if you've done resin before, you know what I mean. What would happen is all the little drips of resin that were on the bit that I'm not filling yet would cure, and then they'd stay there, and then you fill it with your second layer of clear resin, and even though it's all clear, it does tend to leave that pattern, and you'll see it on my finished piece because I still managed to make a bit of a mess. Yeah, you just try to be careful and only get the resin in the area where the tail is, and then you won't have all the little patterns on your finished piece, which is hard to explain, but if you know, you know. If you don't, just ignore me. Whilst that was curing, it was time to prepare my image to go inside the crystal ball globe-shaped area, which I'm going to fill in my next pour. You could fill it with absolutely anything, like a 3D object would probably be the way most people go, but I really fancied putting a picture in there. So here in the Canva app on my iPad, I was just using the AI feature to see if I could get a really good picture of dragon's eggs in like a forest glade. So that's what I put into my search, and these are the results it came up with, and I was just trying a few more just to show you the ideas that it came up with and how easy it is to use the AI feature. I ended up with 4 because I couldn't choose which one I liked best, and then I printed them out onto acetate on my laser printer. And now that is quite important. I'm using a laser printer which uses toner, and toner is absolutely fine in resin. It won't, the colours won't bleed or anything like that. But if you're using an inkjet printer, you will need to seal your transparency film before it goes into resin. And for that, you can use a few layers of spray varnish, or you can laminate it in a laminating pouch. And this is the one that I decided on, and this is how it looked after it was printed out. And what I'm doing there is trying to decide whether it's just too transparent or whether I should put something white behind it. I was thinking some white vinyl or maybe even spray paint white behind it. In the end, I decided to leave it just the way it was and take a risk. White behind it would have just made it stand out so much more. Anyway, we'll see how it turns out, won't we? Now, I wanted my image to stay nicely in place when I put the deep pour resin in. So what I decided to do was just add a little bit of UV resin to the cured epoxy that's already in there. Put my picture into position, making sure it's fully in contact with the little line of UV resin that I've put there, and then cure it so that when I put my deep pour resin in, the picture stays as much in position as possible. You can only do it obviously at the area where it touches the cured epoxy, so everything else can still move, but at least it kind of kept in position. Okay, once the picture was in place, I cured it with my Let's Resin UV lamp. As you can see, it's getting very grubby. I've used it a lot. I love that lamp. Right then, to fill it up, I mixed up the rest of my deep pour resin, and for that I needed 12 fluid ounces. And yes, I know I told you it in millilitres before, and now I've changed to fluid ounces, but anyway, that was the easiest way to work it out because I needed to do 8 fluid ounces of part A and 4 fluid ounces of part B. I added a strip of acetate to my image to enable me to be able to move it around if I needed to without sticking my fingers in the resin when it was finished. And yeah, I'm just adding a bit at each side, going from side to side. I'm doing it from a height, obviously, and that's making some bubbles appear, but it doesn't matter because deep pore resin is very slow to cure, and those bubbles just come to the top by themselves, and really it's not a problem at all. Right when that was cured, it was time to trim off the excess part of the image that I didn't need anymore and fill it up with one last layer of resin. And here I've got a few different things that I wanted to try out, all from Laura's Art Corner. I've got the little baubles and some lovely glass glitter, some gold glitter, some fairy dust. I just threw everything at it to see what would happen. The thing is, when it's your first time making a certain thing, you just don't know what will work and what won't work, do you? And you just have to kind of use your imagination and guess to see how it will turn out. I really wasn't sure if these little tiny crystals, which I love so much, would actually shine within the resin. Sometimes things like that lose their shine once you add them to resin, but actually they turned out really, really good. Once they were all in, it was time to add my resin. I decided to use Let's Resin's Fast Cure resin just because it was handy, because I knew I was actually going to leave it all until the next day. That last layer of resin that I did was still quite soft, and I needed to be sure that it would be completely cured before I tried to demold it. Otherwise I would end up with fingerprints and distortions and all sorts. You do need to be careful with deep pore resin to make sure it's had long enough. So I could have used regular epoxy just to fill this up, but yeah, I used Fast Cure just because it was handy. And I wanted it to be glittery, and I'd found some really fine green glitter in my glitter box, and I thought that would do the trick nicely. Okay, the next day it was time to demold it, and I was a little bit nervous because when you get instructions for demolding with a mould, it makes you wonder if you're going to be in with a little bit of a challenge. Anyway, I was being very careful. Do you see that? I'm just pressing my nail against it to check that it's cured enough to be demolding, and it had. It was nice and hard, so I carried on. So the idea when demolding this is to demold the ball shape first, which is nice and easy, and then you go for the jaw area of the dragon's head. And at first I did struggle quite a bit, but what I ended up doing was getting some soapy water, because that always helps. And once I got a little bit of soapy warm water in there, it really did help to stretch the mould over the jaw. Once you've got the jaw area of the dragon's face off, everything else comes easy. So yeah, I would highly recommend warm water. It makes the mould more flexible, and it helps to release the resin from the mould as well. I'll give you a detailed look at the end, but for now it's time to start painting. Now, obviously you might not want to paint yours. You could brush mica powders or chameleon powders, whatever you like, onto the mould before pouring your resin. That is one option. I decided for this option just because I enjoy the painting process. I'm completely covering it in white paint as the first job, so it's got a nice base to add my colours onto. When that was done, it was time to start painting it. And here I've got a few colours ready just for his chest area. Oh, I'm calling it a him. I don't know, maybe it's a lady. Who knows? Let's call it a him. So I've got some colours ready for his chest area. I decided I wanted to go with green for some parts of it and purple for other parts. But apart from that, I didn't really have a solid plan. These things evolve as you go along and you just see what looks good at the time, don't you? So what I like to do with each area is start with the palest colour and build up to the darkest colours for the, darkest areas. And that's all there is to say, really. Shall we have some music? Yeah, let's put some music on while you watch the painting process. So with the painting all finished, let's have a closer look. As you can see, the image turned out well. It was hard to capture on camera. That's why I'm giving you this little close-up first, because when you see the whole thing together, it's hard to capture the image. But if you look closer at the surface, you'll see what I was talking about before. If you get drips of resin on your mould, you can see what's happened, can't you? Yeah. That's why you should try not to get resin on your mould when you're doing the first little pour for the dragon. Try to keep it as clean as possible. But other than that, I'm really happy with how the image turned out. I think it's very magical and mystical looking. And now let's look at the dragon. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I'm so glad I went to the trouble of painting it, because I think it's made all the difference. I do like it when you brush mica powders onto the mould, but it's a very different effect, and I like this. I used a range of different pearlescent acrylic paints for this, and don't be thinking that you won't be able to do it. I know some people are not very confident on their abilities when it comes to painting, but really, I don't really think you can go wrong with it. It's not difficult, and have a go, just have a go. As long as you try to make the highlights on the area where the light would catch it, and the dark areas of paint where there's creases in the legs and places like that where it's going to be more shadowed, you will get a really good finish. And as I was struggling so much with the filming and photography in the lighting that I had on that day, I did take it outside so that I could try to capture the sparkles that I got from all those different things I threw in on that last layer. All in all, I'm very happy with the results. If I had another go, I think I would try the image with a white background. I know I could print it onto photo paper, but then I would have to seal it, because with photo paper the resin tends to seep in between the layers of paper, and you need to laminate it then. So I thought about adding white vinyl, like I mentioned before, behind the transparency, or white spray paint. So I would like to have another go and try that. But I'm thinking as I speak, and I've just thought maybe it wouldn't be quite so good, because if the back of the image is white, you can only see the image from the front, can't you? I don't know, maybe that's not such a good idea. Anyway, I'm really waffling now. If you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up, and please do subscribe if you would like to. All the links and discount codes will be in the video description if you fancy getting this mould for yourself. So yeah, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.